Stop! Are you still translating in your head? That's slowing you down. If you want to speak English fluently and confidently, you must start thinking in English. But how can you do that? In this video, I'll show you why thinking in English makes a huge difference and how you can train your brain to do it quickly and naturally. Section 1. It's time to think in English. Today, we're diving into one of the most effective techniques for mastering English, learning to think in English. So, why is this technique so important? Well, when you're trying to speak English, the biggest challenge many people face is the urge to translate everything from their native language into English. This translation process slows down your speech, makes you think twice, and ultimately affects your fluency. Now, imagine you could skip the translation step entirely. What if you could speak directly in English without having to pause and think, how do I say this in English? That's where thinking in English comes into play, and trust me, once you start doing this, it can be a game changer for your fluency. Let me explain why. Imagine you're having a conversation, and you suddenly feel that you're thinking in English without translating. You just know the words and sentences. Everything feels smoother, faster, and much more natural. That's the power of thinking in English. Instead of mentally translating from your native language, you're thinking directly in the language you want to speak. Your brain adapts, and your speaking speed improves because there's no time wasted switching languages in your head. Now, let's look at an example. Think about a simple sentence. What time is it? In your native language, this is easy, right? But in English, when you're translating from your native language, you may hesitate for a second and think, wait, what's the word for time in English? That pause is what happens when you translate, and it can slow you down. But when you think directly in English, your brain knows immediately that the sentence is, what time is it? There's no hesitation, no need to think twice. The words just come naturally, and you speak without thinking about it. So, how can you start thinking in English? It all begins with practice. One simple way to start is by talking to yourself in English. It might sound strange at first, but trust me, this technique helps train your brain to switch gears and start using English automatically. For example, when you wake up in the morning, try describing your actions in English. I'm getting out of bed. I'm going to make breakfast. I'll have some coffee. Even simple, everyday things can help you practice thinking in English. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Another great way to immerse yourself in English is by watching TV shows and movies in English. But here's the trick. Try not to use subtitles in your native language. Instead, watch the content with English subtitles or without any at all. This helps you connect what you're hearing with the English words directly, instead of translating them in your head. It also allows you to hear natural conversations and sentence structures that native speakers use. Lastly, start labeling things around your house or workspace in English. Look at the objects around you and think or say their names in English. For example, instead of thinking about the table in your native language, just think table and say it out loud. Doing this constantly helps your brain connect English words to real-world objects, and over time, it becomes second nature. The more you practice these steps, the more your brain will start thinking in English automatically. It may feel a bit strange at first, but keep practicing, and you'll be amazed at how quickly your fluency improves. Thinking in English isn't just about speaking faster, it's about speaking more naturally and confidently. So, the next time you're having a conversation in English, try to avoid translating in your head. Instead, focus on thinking directly in English and see how much smoother the conversation becomes. It's not magic. It's all about practice and getting your brain used to the language. Section 2. How to practice. Now, let's talk about something really important. practical ways to start thinking in English. One of the hardest parts of learning a language is always trying to translate everything into your own language. But here's the thing. Learning a language is all about changing your mindset. The key to learning English and becoming fluent is to make English a part of your lifestyle. There are a few different ways to do this. But first, let's clear something up. Thinking in English doesn't mean that your conversations will be perfect right away. It's a process, but you'll see rapid progress once you get started. The first step is to immerse yourself in an environment that's constantly filled with English. The more English surrounds you, the faster your brain will adapt to the language. Listening to English music, reading English books, or following the latest news in English. All of these are great ways to incorporate English into your life. Let me give you an example. Listening to English music is a fantastic way to memorize vocabulary and improve your pronunciation. When you sing along with the lyrics and understand them in English, your brain starts thinking in English directly. With time, you'll begin remembering those words not just from the song, but from other moments in your life as well. For instance, when you hear "I don't need a reason" in a song, your brain will quickly recall the meaning of that phrase and the situations where it's used. Things like this speed up your process of thinking in English and make it natural. As you keep singing or listening to songs, those words and sentences become embedded in your brain. If a songwriter is thinking in English when writing about a topic, then we should also try to think in English when forming our thoughts. Next, let's look at reading English books. The books you read can teach your brain new words, sentence structures, and expressions. Try not to translate as you read. It might be difficult at first, but this will push your brain to start thinking in English. When you don't understand a word in the book, try to guess its meaning. Tip: if you don't know a word, read the sentence carefully and try to figure out the meaning from the context. For example, imagine reading the sentence, "I was over the moon when I saw her." At first, it may be unclear, but context is key here. The phrase "over the moon" is a common English idiom used to express happiness, meaning extremely happy. If you don't get it right away, the next time you see "over the moon," you'll remember the emotional context and understand its meaning more easily. Another excellent method is listening to English podcasts. Especially if you're at the beginner level, podcasts can be a great resource. Listening to podcasts that explain English in simple terms will help your brain immerse itself in the language. As you listen, don't worry about understanding every word or sentence. Instead, focus on getting the main idea and key points. Grasping the main idea is a powerful way to improve your thinking speed and speaking abilities. Of course, social media also plays a role. Making English comments, interacting in English on social media platforms will help you think in English more naturally. Engaging in conversations with English speakers online allows you to practice actively and helps you familiarize yourself with sentence structures. Making online friends and messaging daily in English forces your brain to think in English and helps make your conversations flow more naturally. These are just a few excellent ways to start thinking in English. But of course, the most important part of language learning is consistent practice, which builds the foundation for your English thinking process. If you read, listen, and write something in English every day, words and sentence structures will naturally start to stick in your brain. Remember, thinking in English and speaking English is a skill and a habit. By constantly exposing your brain to English, you'll learn to think without translating and without hesitation. By taking small steps and practicing regularly, eventually, this new habit will become a natural part of your brain's functioning. You can subscribe to my channel now to learn English quickly and effectively. I'll be creating fresh content for you all the time.